wants to say. So we've been trying to stall a little bit. We have one panelist who's not here, and I apologize for that. I'm sure he'll be here and he'll join in. I want to respect all of your time. Everyone came here, took time out of their day. My name is Marvin Christie. I really appreciate all of you being here. This is Keeley and this came out of a simple conversation. We were at an event where Mayor Keeley was there, and I kind of put him on the spot, asking him some questions, and he was very receptive, and it started a dialogue, and Kaylin asked him some questions, and they were harder questions, and he said, why don't you talk to Manu about that? And so he brought Manu into the conversation. It was out of his district. So anyway, I'm a Santa Cruz native. I enjoyed growing up, visiting my dad in his office downtown where he was since 1971. I now own a business downtown. I spend a lot of time down there. I have 2 children. My boys go downtown. And there's some things in our community that are less than ideal. We're hoping that this conversation is a beginning of a bigger movement and an organization where we have all these great panelists who have agreed to join us, and they all have different expertise, and together I think we're going to have a neat group here. So let's see. Let's let Kaylin introduce herself.
Yeah, so you did a great job. So I'm Kaylin Wagner-Marsh. I'm also a resident here in Santa Cruz. I live in Live Oak. Manu is my supervisor. And yeah, so we started a conversation. Jessica Soto also was involved in that conversation, was really integral in making this happen. And you know, from our perspective, we were upset and we were angry about some of the things that we were seeing. And then after having conversations with many of these people, we realized that this is a really dynamic and complex issue. So our goal here today is to kind of unpack a little bit more of that, find out where the gaps are, and let's make this better. So what we should do now is maybe do some introductions. If you all would like to just maybe say who you are, your position in the county, just to familiarize everyone who may not know you. Danny, do you want to get started?
I'll go first. So my name is Danny Contreras. I'm the health service manager of the MAT, Medication Assisted Treatment Program, at all the county clinics. So that's HPHP, Emmeline, and Watsonville Health Center. So I just manage that program, not the actual clinics. In 2016, we started the program, and real quick overview. It was just me as the first drug and alcohol counselor and 1 doctor, and we quickly went from 1 doctor and me to over 30 doctors providing this service. And I have a team now of about 10 drug and alcohol counselors, nurses, medical staff, and everything. That we also go out to the mobile clinic, and the street medicine team goes out to homeless encampments and start working with patients where they're at to get them in treatment, get them their health care, get them their mental health. So that's what I do.
Thank you.
Do you guys mind standing up for the people in the back?
Yeah, I should have done that. I'll do
I'm happy to stand up as well. I'm Manu Koenig, 1st District County Supervisor. For those of you who don't know, the 1st District is really the district right in the middle of the county. It includes Live Oak, where we are now, SoCal, and up Old San Jose Road all the way to the summit, as well as parts of the city in Prospect Heights.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Bernie Escalante, and I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Santa Cruz.
Hi everyone, my name is Robert Radner. I'm the Director of the Housing for Health Division in the County of Santa Cruz Human Services Department. Glad to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
Thank you.
Justin Cummings, 3rd District County Supervisor, also former Mayor of the City of Santa Cruz. And my district is the majority of the City of Santa Cruz, Bonnie Doon, Davenport, Swanton, North Coast, all the way up to White House Canyon. So most of the North Coast as you leave the City of Santa Cruz, that's my district.
My name is Nick Baldrige. I'm a lieutenant with the Sheriff's Office. I oversee our community policing unit, so I have all the different substations and the sergeants that work throughout the county and all the different areas of the county. I also run our school resource officer program and our alcohol and tobacco compliance unit.
Thank you.
I'm Lisa Murphy. I'm the Deputy City Manager for the City of Santa Cruz, and I oversee the Homeless Response Division, the newest division in our city. I also am a lifelong resident of this county and have a vested interest in what happens as well.
Hi, I'm Phil Kramer, I'm the CEO of Housing Matters. We're a local nonprofit working on solutions to homelessness. We do everything from outreach to emergency shelter, provide supportive services throughout the county. We're building supportive housing. We're about 220 people in shelter on our campus, and we support about 250 households throughout the community, throughout the county.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm sure, we have gaps in our panel here, but I think we have a great lineup and we're so excited to hear all of your perspectives. We have a few set questions and then we're gonna open it up to the audience to be able to ask some questions and those watching on Zoom as well. So I'm gonna get started and I'll ask a few of you panelists, but if any of you would like to chime in about any of these questions, please feel free to do so. So this first one is referencing the point-in-time statistics. These are statistics that represent questions that were asked of the unhoused and their personal answers. So the point-in-time statistics had much information surrounding the unhoused, and at times it seemed a little bit conflicting. For example, 37% of those surveyed cited eviction as the primary condition that led to homelessness, and only 9% thought the primary condition was drug or alcohol abuse. But at the same time, 67% self-reported that they conduct in drug or alcohol abuse. Now, while only 8% responded that illness or a medical problem had led to being unhoused, 49% had self-reported a chronic health condition, 57% a physical disability, 39% a psychiatric or emotional condition, 35% PTSD, and the list goes on. There appears to be a disconnect between what drives and what keeps people in homelessness. What are your thoughts on what drives and keeps people in being unhoused? And I have a few here: Phil Kramer, Lisa Murphy, Robert Rabner, and Danny Contreras that I'd like to answer this. Lisa, would you like to take this away?
Sure. Do you want me to stand?
Yes.
Talk loudly. Sure. I think, well, as by those numbers, you can see it's a really complex issue. And there's a lot of drivers. And I don't think that it's a one-size-fits-all description either. There's also domestic violence. But I do think it's not only domestic violence, it's job loss, which should be included in there. Mental health and addiction, huge. I think that's a driver, and what keeps people out is their inability even to get the services they need so they can then get into housing. And then, of course, the lack of affordable housing. I think you're gonna hear that from us up and down this panel, that the housing is huge. So I'll let others jump in because I know our time is quick, but I think that's a driver, and I also think it keeps people out. And there's also, I think, some, we'll talk about policy changes that also limit people's abilities to get into housing as well.
Great. Phil Kramer, did you wanna speak?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot to parse in the PIT count, and just looking at the data can be really difficult. I think looking at trends in the PIT count can be helpful, actually, to see how it's changed over time. We just look at the 2019 PIT count and the 2022 PIT count. The change in people experiencing homelessness with disabling conditions went from 39% to 67%. So people with existing medical conditions, if they're living unhoused in the community, those existing conditions are gonna worsen over time. And I think we're seeing that, right? We're seeing people that are unhoused for longer periods of time because we don't have enough housing in the community. So I just came back from a housing conference in San Diego, 2.5-day conference, 2,000 people there. For years, the conference was really focused on housing production and legislation. And this conference was homelessness and supportive housing was part of every track, every workshop. And this one doctor said something that's really powerful, and she said there's no medicine more powerful than housing. And it really starts with housing as the foundation. So health, wellness, well-being, and community integration starts with housing. So again, I think to Lisa's point, across the panel, we'll hear that. So what does a solution look like? On any given day, between 2,000 and 3,000 people are experiencing homelessness in our community. Between 2,000 and 3,000, and that's probably an undercount. And on a good day, when all shelter beds are open, there's between 500 and 600 shelter beds. We are gonna see people living unhoused in the community, right? With that much of a disparity. And the reality of living unhoused in the community is you're living your life in public. Right? Most of us, I can go home, I'm having my breakdown, my whatever, my moment, my glass of wine in private. I'm going to the bathroom in private, using the shower in private. People that are unhoused are living their life in public. They have no other place to be, unhoused and unsheltered, right? So again, for some of our folks, they're in shelter. So I think, taking up more time, just drawing our attention to the fact that many couple thousand people are living unhoused in the community, they're living their life in public. They don't have the benefit of living their life in the privacy of their homes like I would imagine most for all of us.
Thank you. Robert Ratner.
Yeah, I could talk for a long time on this topic. So I'm going to say a couple things about the PIT count. So PIT stands for point in time count, and it's a survey that's done typically every 2 years. We're now trying to do it every year, but it's 1 day. So if you think about the implications of doing a study on just 1 day versus looking at it over the course of the year, you're going to have some bias in the data. And what doing a survey on 1 day shows you is who are the people you're most likely to catch on a single day. The people you're most likely to catch on a single day are the people who have long histories on the street, multiple barriers and challenges to getting back into an environment when there's not enough affordable places, not enough residential treatment. So I think it's really critical we all keep that in mind. Another part that I wanted to talk about is if you look at the data, there's a data system called the Homeless Management Information System that's mandated by the federal government. If you look at the data in Santa Cruz County about the percentages of people with behavioral health issues who are accessing programs, it's only about a quarter of the people. So it's very different from the PIT count over the course of a year. And if you look at the number of people who have a substance use challenge that they're reporting that in the survey, it's also only around 13%. Any of you know how many people in the US on a given day are struggling with a mental health problem? About 20 to 25% of people are struggling with a mental health problem. And with a substance use disorder, you see between 5 and 10%. One of the real challenges I think on this issue is we have a lot of stigma around mental health and substance use issues. And instead of focusing on, we're gonna talk more about probably, affordable housing and places where people can sleep, we focus on health conditions that we believe are a sign of a moral failure. And I think as a society, in the US, around the globe, we really need to understand that mental health and substance use issues are health conditions. And as we start to treat people and those things as health issues, we're gonna make some progress in supporting folks who are struggling to get into housing. There's a book out called Homelessness is a Housing Problem, and we have a lot of chairs in the room, and one of the metaphors of this idea is that there aren't enough places for people to sleep that they can afford. The people that end up on the street are the ones who have the most barriers to being in community with others or being welcomed into space. So the disparities we see in who ends up being homelessness is because we don't have enough chairs where people can come in and sleep and be supported. The people we see on the streets are the ones where there's lots of stigma and disparity, and that's what contributes to the statistics. And I think that's part of why when you ask people why they're homeless, they talk about the housing, the loss of jobs, loss of housing, landlords raising the rent. And the other issues, the health issues, often come when you're on the street, not before. So we often forget correlation, we mix up correlation and causation. Which came first? And as Phil was saying, if you're sleeping in a tent, how many of you have had trouble sleeping? Right? So you're different the next day. And so imagine trying to sleep outside with all the stressors about sleeping outside. There's a lot of evidence that if you have trouble sleeping, that will increase the likelihood of a behavioral health challenge. So I could go on, and I'm going to stop.
Thank you.
I will continue later.
Thank you. Danny, did you want to contribute?
Sure, why not? I mean, I think they all hit everything. There's so much stuff, it's a multifaceted thing, right? And I think that PIT, right, point in count, that's just a snapshot, right? That's just whoever we can get. There's people up in the mountains, Pocono and all those places that don't even come down sometimes. And you don't know that data, you know? I think substance abuse is huge, right? I know it's not, probably it didn't show in that data, but there's substance abuse. People are stigmatized, like he was saying, and they sometimes can't get the help that they need. Sometimes they go to places and they're turned away, right? I used to work at the shelter, and now it's called Housing Matters, And I used to manage the program there, and I used to be a case manager there and housing people, you know, sometimes some people because of their mental health. You know, I'll give an example, there was this lady that I worked with there, and she would not trust me for, no matter what, I just needed her to sign some papers so I could get her a Section 8 voucher and get her housed. But because of her mental health, she wouldn't. She would literally pull her pants down in front of me, pee, cuss me out, tell me all kinds of crazy stuff. But we had a plan. We had a plan that, even though wasn't the best plan, but it was the plan that we could do. When she decompensated and we got her to the hospital, they got her on her psych meds that she was supposed to be on. Then she went and sat at the El Dorado house and got, you know, stable. I was like, it's my chance to go see her. I went to see her. Hey, just need you to sign these papers and I'm gonna get you housed, you know? And she's apologizing to me. We took care of all the little details that we needed to take care of, and she's been housed. I get a Christmas card from her every year. Of what, you know, just thankful for what we did when we were at the shelter, you know? The other thing is, you know, sometimes there's a lot of stigma with that policing. I see it at the clinics when I started. You know, there's a way to talk to somebody. I can talk to somebody like they're my equal, or I can talk to somebody like that, right? And if I'm talking in a certain way, or my behavior or my body language is showing, like, I don't value you as a human being, you're trash, you're a drug addict, you're homeless, people can feel and sense that, and they don't want to get the help, right? If you're doing that, right? I remember when I was at the shelter, we had security. I don't know how it is now all the way, but.
Still have security.
Okay. Well, there was security, and they probably didn't have the best training, and I was always going out there to try to kind of figure a situation out. This person was getting cussed out. I'm like, well, why are they cussing you out? Let me pull you away, because you're getting kind of crazy with this patient or client. And let me talk to the client and say, what happened? Man, it's freaking cold outside, it's raining, and my socks and shoes are wet. I'm just asking for some donations, and this person thinks I'm doing something else. I'm not. That's all I need, some socks. They were gonna get banned from the homeless shelter of their essential services that they need for 30 days because they couldn't communicate right. And we had to figure out a way, okay, cool, let me pull this person away from this situation, let me de-escalate this person, talk to them later, let me figure out with this client, and then get them what they need. And so this person didn't get a 30-day ban from the shelter, which would have been worse than being out in the streets with no food, no bathroom, no nothing, just wherever they can go, you know? So there's stuff like that. There's stuff when people show up in the clinic, which I feel like we have grown by leaps and bounds within culture and shifting culture in our clinics across the whole entire county. You know, people can see it, like, you're looking at me like I'm a drug addict. You don't want to help me out. You know, if I'm talking to you like that, people get cussed out. You're gonna get a reaction that you don't need to get when you just talk to somebody as a human being, right? I've tried to make it with my team and everywhere else, and we're even doing some other training still right now. It's called AVP, Alternative Violence Program, where you get a very diverse groups and you put them together, patients, staff, and all that stuff. So people can connect on a human level, right? It's really important that people connect and know that they're valuable, right? I like this term. I probably talked too much, sorry. I like this term, I can go forever. Unconditional significance, right? It doesn't matter what you've done, what you've been through, like, you have potential and unconditional significance as a human being.
Yeah. And I really appreciate everything that all of you have to say, and we are going to run out of time at this point. Sorry. We have 6 questions that we're going to try to get through. That was question 1, and we're going to do our best. So the next question is, what current policies and planned policy changes surrounding mental health, addiction, and unhoused community safety? What are the current policies and planned changes to policies? And what other policies are needed to address these issues? And Mayor Keeley, do you mind starting that question? Or welcome, and
Thank you.
Sorry we didn't get your introduction, but
Sorry, I was
Mayor
late.
Keeley is here.
Not your fault, my fault.
We're grateful to have you. So just about any current policies, planned policies, and then the policies that maybe aren't planned but should be.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you. I apologize for being late, especially this distinguished group of folks and folks from the community. I apologize for that. Current policies, I think it's important to distinguish between the city and the county. I do that every time I speak to this issue because we are not the same. The county is not a small version or a large version of the city, and the city is not a small version of the county. God created counties to provide health and human services. That's what they do. They stand in the shoes of the state and federal government to deliver services to all kinds of folks in need, including those members of our community who are living outside. Cities are municipal corporations. You can wander around City Hall all day. You won't find a Department of Health, a Department of Mental Health, or anything of the sort. You'll find a planning department, public works, and parks and recreation. That's the kind of thing we do as cities. In the homeless space, what we do, I think, is we do some work in the homeless space of what I would call a social service nature. It's not an absolutely bright line. So we do some work, as Mr. Mwale and his team do inside the city. But by and large, that's not what we're very good at. Cities aren't very good at that because they're not organized to do that. So, policies. I think that going forward, what the city can do that will make a real difference is that the city does the brick and mortar side of what this need is. In other words, the city can be the entity that leads on, in the city of Santa Cruz, on shelter, navigation center, permanent supportive housing. If we do that in sufficient quantity, for example, in concert with Housing Matters at the Coral Street site, what is it we can do that builds the brick and mortar side? Because the state of California, which is the sort of the parent company, if you will, of the county of Santa Cruz, they're not ready at this point to provide that kind of brick and mortar support. They are much more over on the side of providing the health and human services that are poured into the facility side. So I think the change that I hope the city engages in, and I see that some of my colleagues here, we are in robust conversations about this, is to see if we can fashion a bond in 2024 for the ballot inside the city of Santa Cruz to provide the brick and mortar side of homeless, and to provide another part of the bond, think of it as a barbell. The other barbell would be over on the affordable housing side. But I think that's the big moves in terms of the city.
Great, thank you. So again, these are the policies, current policies, future policies, and what policies are needed. Chief, do you mind? Yeah. Do you have an opinion on that? And you can keep it short.
Yeah,
It's okay.
it's a little bit outside of law enforcement's lane, I think, but, I mean, there's a lot to talk about policies and legislation and the decriminalization of drugs, the deinstitutionalization of mentally ill. There's a lot of stuff that's going on that has happened and will continue to happen that I think it's important for you to pay attention to. I can say within the city, the police department, the fire department, along with the city manager's office, we're working currently on a program that's similar to a CAHOOTS model to bring into the city. It's a non-law enforcement response to mental health conditions, substance abuse situation, homelessness sort of situations, instead of calling fire, police, or EMT. I think that's a positive thing. And the other thing that we do have currently, as far as within our organization, is we have mental health liaisons, and I know the sheriff's office does as well. So does Watsonville. We have 2 mental health liaisons that respond either with us or by themselves to subjects that are in crisis. And so that has been extremely helpful and I think powerful in getting people hopefully in a better path and getting them some help in the middle of a crisis, so.
Okay, great, thank you. Officer Baldrige, would you care to add to that, because you guys?
Yeah, I can make it quick. Yeah, we have the mental health liaisons, which we're working on trying to expand that as much as we can. In addition, we have the focused intervention team, and what that is, it's a unit that it works throughout the entire county. So these are individuals that are within city limits, within the county limit, within the unincorporated area. And this team, what they do is they have a list of folks that normally it's either substance use or mental health issues, and that are causing problems within the community. And what they do is they have pretty much a weekly check-in. They go and find folks, they have these check-ins with them, they try and get them resources, connect them up with family members, try and find ways to get them out of the environment that they're in, where they're called being disruptive to the community, and move them to a more stable environment.
Great, thank you. Let's see, so we have, I'm sure everyone has insight here. If anyone would like to answer this question that we haven't called on, I'd love to hear from you. I had a couple other ideas. I don't want to call on 3 more people unless you have input that you'd like. So does anyone, Justin, would you like to speak? That'd be excellent, thank you.
Yeah, so following up on what Mayor Keeley said, you know, the county, we get a lot of the state and federal funding for programs that help people who are either, people who are experiencing poverty, period, housed or unhoused. So with a lot of these teams that are going out, they're trying to get people connected to CalFresh, they're trying to get people connected to MedCal so they can access medical services and have access to food. But it's really challenging when people don't have stable places to be. And so, you know, if somebody one night is, you know, the city opens up the Civic Center as a warming center, and then it closes it and opens up, you know, Depot Park and closes that, people don't have that stability of where they can count on going. So that's why we oftentimes find people going out into the woods, because at least they can create a community and they know that that's where their stuff is, that's where they can go every night. So if they do need to go to, you know, to go to medical services at the MLN campus, or if they need to go to alcohol treatment, they know that they can go back to that place, and that place is where their stuff is gonna be. So, you know, having more locations where we can have more homeless services, I think is really critical. And one of the things that we ran into in the city and the county is nobody wants it by their house. And that's a big issue for us, because we can't, like, if these people don't have a place to go, then there's nothing we can do. And I think, and I know that Supervisor Koenig experienced this, where he's been trying to open up a facility in his district and people got really mad about it. But I think what people, and it comes back to this whole conversation of how we perceive homeless people, when you start getting people the stability, they're able to recuperate themselves. And I think that if you were to go around to the different facilities that we have in town, most oftentimes, I mean, if you go to the Armory, we opened the Armory up and I helped with that in 2020. We haven't really gotten any complaints. 1220 River Street was open next to the tannery, and when it shut down and the Ross camp opened up, they begged us to reopen that camp. So I think it's really important that we start looking at models that work and showing the community what works and trying to work with them so that we can have more places for people to go, we can mitigate the impacts, but we can start moving forward in that way. And the last thing I'll say on this is that, you know, when it comes to housing in our community, the housing escalation has to stop, and we have to figure out something to do. We're not gonna build our way out of this problem. And when I have friends who are like, I bought my house 4 years ago and it's doubled in price, the biggest issue to addressing this is the fact that people who work here, people who provide those services, can't afford to live here. And when I had a friend a couple weeks ago who got 180% rent increase from $1,000 a month to $2,800, she told them no, she's now having to fight them, and the way our system works is that it's her responsibility to find a lawyer. Well, if you're, you know, a county service employee, you're not gonna have the money to afford a lawyer. And so we're losing teachers, we're losing the people who can provide these kinds of services, and so we have to figure out how we can stabilize our housing market so the people who provide these services can live here, and so we don't have more people going into homelessness.
Oh, sorry, Lisa and Manu.
So the question was sort of past policy, current policy, future policy. So I think the first thing I would stress is that the crisis that we see on our streets today has been building for a long time. And we're finally have reached this point where it's just an all-out crisis. We all are faced with it almost every day. And I think we would all agree it's completely unacceptable. Fundamentally, the biggest piece of it is the housing piece. I mean, you heard Dr. Ratner talk about people lose their housing every day, whether it's from a domestic dispute or a roommate dispute, or they lose their job, or any number of other reasons. But they become homeless for longer in communities where there's not rentals available. And Santa Cruz is right up there at the top of the list as one of the most unaffordable places in the whole country with the lowest vacancy rates. So people become homeless and they can't get rehoused easily. So that's the volume problem, right? And in fact, one of the largest groups of people that we're seeing enter homelessness today are seniors. Seniors who cannot keep up with inflation on fixed incomes and are losing their home. So that's the volume problem. Then there's sort of the, I don't know, extremity problem, or the issue that we're seeing with mental health and addiction that has been cited here tonight. And then there's or theft. There's a lot of pieces that have layered on over the last decades that make our law enforcement officers' job a lot harder. So whether it's first of all, back in 2000, we got rid of a lot of the mental health institutions, right? We said, hey, we don't want to institutionalize people. It's not a kind way to treat people with mental illness. And so we got rid of a lot of them. Then we took a lot of people with mental illness and we put them in prison. Then in 2011, the Supreme Court said, hey, California, you guys have a serious problem. You got too many people in your prisons, and you're not providing sufficient mental health or other health services. You've got to reduce this population by 30,000 people. So we had AB 109, which said, okay, we're going to realign the prison population. We're going to keep more people close to where their offenses were committed, close to their communities in local county jails. The county jails were not built to hold people for long periods of time. They're built for really a 30-day stay, maybe a 1-year stay, if at the most. Now people are there for 5 years, 7 years, 9 years, I think maybe is the longest now. And as a result, we don't have the capacity in our jails to hold people even for short amounts of time for misdemeanors. Then you have other things like Prop 47 and 57, which 47 made it so that if you steal anything less than $950 in stuff, it's not a felony, it's a misdemeanor. So these problems have been building, right? And again, we're starting to take action on it. One last fundamental problem is we're sort of treating homelessness as a new problem. So whereas we have consistent and common funding from our federal government and state government to deal with things like child protective services, we don't for homelessness. Our county today has over 40 different grants that we're managing to pay for homeless services. I think it's 40, 41, 43, something like that. Those grants are not all the same. Some are 1 year, some are 3 years. We don't know if we're going to get them in the next period. And so our funding for homelessness is constantly fluctuating. It makes it really difficult to manage. We're constantly reporting. First of all, we're constantly applying for grants. Then we're constantly reporting to say that we're fulfilling the requirements of the grants. Those grants don't provide us a whole lot of flexibility. They don't allow us to say, oh, well, what's the best way to spend our money here on the ground? It's, you have to do this, right? That's dictated by someone in Sacramento or in Washington, D.C. It makes it really hard. So what's changing? First of all, we're really starting to get more organized and dedicated to this issue. And Dr. Ratner is the chief example of that. He was brought on just a couple of years ago as for the first time the county has a dedicated person to deal with the homelessness issue. And we created a division within Human Services, the Housing for Health Division. Dr. Ratner has brought considerable experience from the Bay Area and has helped really to improve the organization of our local homeless services, whether it's the reorganizing the management for the Continuum of Care entity, which manages a lot of those different grant and funding streams, whether it's reforming our homeless management information system, whereby all the organizations that are involved in this issue are reporting who they're working with and sharing that data back with the county so that we know who is homeless in the community and why and how we can help them best next. To organizing the new grant applications, such as the ones for Home Key, right? In the first round of Home Key, our county got zero. We got nothing. We didn't apply for anything. We didn't get anything. In the second round, we got 3 home key grant applications from the state. It's gonna build 63 new beds for people experiencing homelessness in our community. The money that we saw in a surplus for our state budget last year, we are getting that. It is coming into our community and it is helping to fix this problem. You haven't quite seen the results yet, right? Budget surplus was last year, we win the awards. Now we're starting to build stuff. And as Phil said, he's got 120 units of permanent supportive housing going up. The city got $14 million to acquire the site next to the Housing Matters campus. They're gonna be able to expand. I think with hopefully a little more funding, actually be able to build a navigation center there. Like I said, they've got the 63 units in the county. We'll be submitting more home key grant applications for the next round. So things are slowly getting better. Other policies that you should be aware of. You've probably heard the governor talking tough about a lot of this stuff. So last year, the legislature, much with the governor's urging, passed the Care Court legislation, which basically means that these courts can mandate care plans for people. So it's trying to get at the issue of people who are a harm to themselves and others on the streets, suffering from mental illness, and us not having tools to be able to get a care plan for them. The care courts would basically create a system to mandate a care plan for them, and if they don't follow that plan, they go into conservatorship.
Is that institutionalizing again? Is that bringing back?
Well, if you know, the governor's brief says it's not institutions of the past,
Okay.
but it is, I mean, it
has
is
to be. I mean,
essentially,
How else
you know,
can you-
someone does lose a certain amount of their freedom as far as, you know, being able to take care of themselves.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll try to wrap this up.
Thank you.
So there's the Care Court program. There's, you know, the governor wanted to roll out for the whole state. And all of us counties said, please, please no. This has not been tried before. You're not giving us any money to do that. We already have a backlog in our court system. Let us do this incrementally. Let's start with some pilot counties, right? So places like San Francisco are starting the Care Court program this year. Our county is required to do so by December 2024. Still don't have any money identified for how to do it. We're trying to learn from the other counties, but by 2024, you're gonna see it rolled out here one way or another. Governor's also talking about a housing bond, a general obligation bond, so against state revenues, to build, I can't remember the exact number, I think about 10,000 new units of housing, also with a focus on veterans. And then also the governor's talking about looking at our Mental Health Services Act funds and prioritizing housing as a use for those funds, which is a challenge because we definitely rely on those funds here in the county to provide mental health services. And so as much as we want to see housing, it would be great if we had more money rather than having to take the money we already have and, you know, divide off a big chunk for housing. I guess I'll stop there.
Okay.
I've gone on long enough, but
Just
just get a sense of some of the stuff in motion.
I'll be real quick.
Yeah.
I just want to call attention. Well, the long-term policies that we see that you've mentioned, quite a few long-term that are happening. Long-term, we'll see buildings go up. We'll see more shelter beds. But we also need to think about the short-term policies. We need to think about right here, right now, the people on the street, right out Pogo Neck or on the downtown Santa Cruz, and short-term policies that are going to address the housing needs of those people now, because it's going to be a while for them to get somewhere else. So I just wanted to call attention to the difference.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna have to go ahead and scrap probably a lot of our questions. So, okay, citing again the point in time statistics hit, if I remember that now, okay? Which references 42% not wanting government assistance, 26% thinking that they weren't eligible, and 26% turning it down or paperwork being too difficult with 25%. And again, while only 20% of the Benchlands group accepted services offered, why would people not want services offered? Are there not enough for everyone? Or are they the wrong types of services offered? Or is there another reason? So I'm gonna ask a couple of you, but again, if anyone wants to chime in, please feel free. Lisa, since you were so patient last time, you wanna chime in?
I'm really happy to say I have one of our outreach workers here who could probably answer this question a lot better. But I think, no, there's not enough resources. There's not enough beds. There's just simply not enough. to provide for everybody that truly needs and wants it. And why they don't accept, I think the actual number we had was closer to 30% took shelter, accepted shelter. There's a lot of reasons why they don't accept it. One, they don't have trust with the people who are offering, or they've had a traumatic experience with a healthcare provider. Our outreach workers spend months building, as Deanna, I think you were talking about, building that trust that they'll accept the shelter. They've had tons of trauma in their life, and that's to just say, oh yeah, okay, I'll go up to a shelter, sounds great. And the fear of losing their belongings, the lack of community that might be up there that they don't know or trust in that building. Granted, the Armory has a lot of problems, the location for one, but nobody wants it in their backyard, right? So where do you cite a 135 bed shelter location? It doesn't happen like that. It's really, really difficult. So that's, why they don't accept it. Not enough resources. And what was the other piece? Trust. Yeah, and the lack of trust.
Wrong type of services.
Are there the wrong type of service? I just don't think it's enough services. That's the thing. There just isn't enough. There's not enough resources for all of the things that these folks really, really, truly do need. But we have seen successes. I think we've housed the city 34 individuals who have moved through some of our programs, whether it's the Armory or our 1220, which is a more of a transitional housing. We've seen quite a bit of success, but it takes a long time to move from a location on the street to even get yourself prepped and ready to even get into a permanent supportive housing. You've got to have something in between there. That's a really key piece, and a lot of funding needs to go that way.
Thank you so much. So we're gonna start pushing along here. Bernie, would you like to add to this topic?
Well, actually, I was just gonna share a story that one of our outreach workers shared with me about, and I'm sure there's more than just one of these individuals. They got the person into services, into substance abuse sort of treatment. They were living in the benchlands. And after 30 days, they walked right back down to the benchlands. What you have to remember is that we probably all know people that have substance abuse, alcoholism issues, and those most of the time don't get resolved in 30 days. And a lot of us have support systems to bring us in, to support us, to pick us up, to lift us back up, to feed us. A lot of these people don't have that. So it's the continuum of care that's not there either, right? It doesn't just happen in 30 days. So that was a really sad story, and I'm sure that they saw a lot of that, where somebody did finally choose to go to services, but in 30 days, now what? So.
Thank you. Danny?
Yeah, real quick, two things that I think of right off the top is having somebody with lived experience. Someone that they can trust, right? That's how you're gonna make the connection, right? Someone's gonna trust me more because of my own lived experience going out to intent and talking to them than they're gonna trust other people, right? The other piece is, what he was just saying, right? Is people go into treatment for 30 days and there's nowhere for them to go after that. They're getting released from detox and residential right back to the streets. And if you have no home to go to, it's easier to go back and use. You're gonna be back in a certain community where it's not good for you, it's not safe for you. And so we don't have that continuum of care for everybody. I have tons of patients that we get them through detox and Janus, then they go to residential, and maybe if they're lucky, they get into an SLE if there's open, which is a sober living house. Now they have a new thing, recovery residency through Medi-Cal, which in only 8 beds that I think it is, and don't quote me because I don't remember the exact number, to fund for 4 months through Medi-Cal. That's only 8 people. So if somebody else can go there and they don't have no resources, you're coming off the streets or you're coming out of jail, you have nothing. Nothing. No choni socks, like there's everything you got, just basic life stuff you need to figure out how to do. And all that hitting you at one time and you just barely learn some coping skills for 30 days, sometimes that goes out the window, right? And so we need to have that continuum of care. And we talk about this. I've been to so many of these meetings in the last 12 years. I'm formerly incarcerated and I came out of prison to this community, right? And since I came out of prison on parole, high control parole, I've been to every single one of these meetings, or a lot of these meetings, I should say every single one. but a lot of them, and we talk about the same things over and over, and I don't see everything getting done. Like I said, there's a lot of good things that I see or I hear, and that's good, but it's still, like right now, what do we need to do? There needs to be more SLEs or some kind of support where if someone don't have a job, they're homeless, and they go to this program and they get out in 30 days. They need somewhere to stay. They can't pay rent right now because they don't even got a job, right? They need somewhere to go till they can start building up that, where they can get a job, get a resume. If they don't qualify for that, maybe they get Social Security. Maybe some people already have benefits, or because of their mental health, they get the mental disability, you know, they can get some kind of money coming in.
Okay, so what I take out of that is you see that a sober living environment is integral to making sure that people can get out of this.
Yeah, even a transitional housing space.
Okay, thank you.
4 months.
To build on that just
Yeah.
for a minute. You know, our systems of care are exiting people into homelessness every day. The jail, foster youth system, hospital, today, someone will leave, multiple people left some system of care today into homelessness, right?
Yeah.
So we don't have a place for people to go after they exit whatever system that is. Last year, Housing Matters and the team that we work with and our partners helped house over 300 people. Over 300 people. Year over year, we're increasing the number of people that we help move in to housing. So it can work. But all across the system, we don't have enough capacity. We don't have enough shelter beds, we don't have enough case managers, supportive services, housing navigation, landlords willing to say yes to someone who might be a little scruffy around the edges, might not have good credit history, might not want to take a Section 8 voucher. But back to this original question of why would an individual say no to shelter? So I started doing this work about 10 years ago, and I didn't understand that either. We have an empty shelter bed in our congregate shelter on a bunk bed, and the gentleman was saying no to that. I'm in pretty good shape for a 60-year-old. I can't get up to the upper bunk. I have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Someone may not want to or be physically able to come into congregate shelter. Multiple people in a room. The old model was get as many people in a room as possible. We flipped the model because of COVID, saying you have to create social distance, and you've got 50 people in a room, you have to cut that below half. You have to get that down to 17 people. So we were faced with reducing shelter capacity big time or doing something different. So something different was moving all of our cars off our Coral Street campus and installing these individual sleeping cabins called pallet shelters. There were folks that we had been working with on the street who were saying no to shelter. When they saw that they could have their own door, their own 8x8 private unit, it transformed their experience, it transformed us as an organization. So the moral of this story is, it's not so much what's wrong with the individual saying no to a shelter environment, what's wrong with our shelter system, and are we right-sizing it for that individual?
Are there, just so to follow up on that, are there communities that are working with that? Are there, I mean, you're talking about a pretty small number in the parking lot. Are there communities where that's done in the hundreds? Or
Yeah, in really big scales, and Robert knows about this, and we've been following this for a long time and watching this. So this conference I was just at, San Jose, Santa Clara County has 500 of these, they call them temporary interim shelters or sleeping cabins, and they're on pace, they have 1,000 planned. So San Jose is really working hard, Santa Clara County, to find this interim. How do we support people, and I'm gonna say this sounds like hyperbole, how do we keep people alive long enough to get them housed? So San Jose is just one really nearby example, but communities across the country are doing these, we call them pallet villages or sleeping cabins, these temporary interim, I hate to say interim housing, because it's not housing, but it's this interim step, and they're using these pop-up interim small domiciles. Thank you.
We're gonna try, Justin, it seems like you
Yeah,
want
that's
to say something.
fine.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna try and move through here,
Yeah,
so.
we're almost supposed to be done right now, but we do have 2 more questions. We're gonna try to do it quickly, and we definitely wanna leave time for you guys to ask questions as well. So, this is building on that and what we've all been talking about, but if the activities in the community continue to compromise the safety of the community. This is housed and unhoused. At what point do we force the services? We sort of talked about the care court, and we talked about a couple of those, but at what point do we punish the criminal behavior? Whether that's using drugs in public, drug paraphernalia, littering, you know, urinating, defecating, the stuff that we've all seen, the stuff that's right in our faces. When do you force the enforcement of the existing laws? And I think I'd love to have law enforcement start that, and then the services follow.
Well, I'll start off by saying that I think law enforcement is a tool to help with some of the behavior issues. Whether they're housed or unhoused, we need to enforce behavior, okay? However, we cannot enforce our way out of this problem. When we write an infraction ticket to somebody that can't pay it, it goes to civil assessment against their credit. So that actually starts negatively affecting them once they decide to make choices about housing or substance abuse treatments and those sort of things. There's also issues, as Supervisor Koenig talked to, about capacity at the jail. I'm not saying incarceration is the answer to these social issues either. But now, because most offenses, drug offenses, are misdemeanor offenses, A, the jail does not take them, B, the jail cannot keep them unless there's violence involved. I have talked to people with substance abuse issues in their past, and they say that timeout, that 5-hour timeout into the jail did actually help some people reassess what avenue they wanted to take in life. Right now, we write them a ticket and we release them. They go right around the corner or down the street and continue with the behavior that we just cited them for. But that's Proposition 47. It turned drug offenses into misdemeanors, felonies into misdemeanors. And again, I'm not advocating for incarcerating all these folks. I'm not saying it's the answer, but it can be a tool that forces them through the court system, maybe into programs, if there was the programs. Somebody stepping in for them to maybe make a different choice for them. So I'll leave it at that. A lot of challenges around bandwidth at the jail, bandwidth at the court system, and the changes in legislation are now resulting in citations instead of arrests.
Nick, do you have anything to add to that, or
Yeah, just a couple things. I mean, as some of you may know, the war on drugs from the 80s didn't really stop our drug problem today. So we can't arrest ourselves out of this problem. And it's really not a justice system problem with a lot of these drug users. They need the services and the help that they can get. And we talk about 30 days treatment and that not being enough. It's not. And for most of them, there's something else underlying that caused the start to that substance abuse. And are we treating that underlying issue, but at the same time we're treating the substance use? Because if we don't treat that, they're gonna get out and they're gonna go right back to it, because they're trying to mask whatever that issue is. And each individual person has an individual story of how they got to where they're at, and so they have to be given the treatment in that same order. They have to get it individually to what they do. Due to a fire, obviously we don't have the sobering center in front of the jail anymore. That is on its way back, and that was that 5-hour timeout that they weren't being booked, they weren't being fingerprinted, they weren't being photographed. They were going there with members from Janus to give them services there while they're sobering up, and hopefully walking out the door and getting them to that next step. And so it's really one of those issues where we need to move people towards those resources to get them the treatment, to get them better than where they're at, and we can't arrest our way out of it.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll be quick.
Yeah.
I'll just be quick on this,
Thank you.
because I do think at a larger systemic level, you know, we've been hearing about Medicare for all and these kinds of things, but that access to medical care is a huge thing, because if you're not at that lower poverty level, you don't qualify for Medicare. right? And so if you do have a mental health issue, or you do have chronic pain, and you can't afford treatment, then people go find whatever's gonna make them feel good, right? And so sometimes that's alcohol, sometimes it's cannabis, sometimes it's heroin, so there's a variety of different things that people will take if those substances provide them some kind of medical relief. And then I guess the other thing I'll also add is that we are also in a very unique time where for about 10 to 15 years, we had pharmaceutical companies pumping people with opioids, saying that they weren't harmful, they weren't addictive, and now we're seeing the repercussions of that, because when those people got their prescriptions cut, they're gonna go find something else, and that something else is heroin, and now we see fentanyl popping up. But I think we also have to really put that into context, because we did have the pharmaceutical companies creating this problem that we see before us today. They contributed to it in a major way, and we're getting a tiny little bit of money from that, because if we didn't settle with them, we could be in lawsuits with them for 40, 50 years. And so we're gonna take that little bit and do what we can with it, but we're also recovering from something that was just, sadly, had contributed to this major issue.
Thank you. Does anyone else, anything quickly about compelling the treatment or enforcing? Then we have another question if no one wants to jump.
I can say
Dr.
something
Ryan.
briefly.
Thank you.
When you don't have enough resources available to help people and you have a policy to mandate treatment, what ends up happening, and I've been involved with this myself, is that the people who have these mandates get to jump in line for the thing. And so is that really how we want to set up a system? I think what we really need to do is have an honest look at the capacity of the resources we need to truly help people. Make sure we have enough of those before we start mandating things. Because that's fundamentally the challenge that I've heard over and over again. We don't have enough places where people can sleep. We don't have enough treatment providers to help people with issues that they're struggling with. When we get there, then I think we're in a better place to talk about, okay, do we really need to mandate treatment? Most of the people I've interacted with in my career want a private place where they feel loved and supported and cared for, and if it was offered to them and available on a consistent basis, they would take it. We wouldn't need to mandate the treatment. We're just not offering that, and I think the desire to mandate is a cover for not really wanting to look at our lack of capacity.
Kind of all encompassing, and we're running out of time. We want to make sure that there's enough time for audience questions. So whoever would like to answer this, please feel free. So if I have these numbers correctly, considering the $2.5 million cost associated with the benchlands cleanup, or the smaller scale $60,000 cost to prevent debris from going into the waterway from the Emmeline encampment, is there an estimated hard cost calculation for these issues, whether that be associated with cleanups, policing, services, etc.? And what would an all-encompassing solution look like in contrast to that, and how would that potential cost compare? So just take it away, anybody.
Easy. You have the easy number.
I do have a list of people, so Fred, you're right here.
Well, if there is such a aggregated number, I don't know that anybody here has that number on them. It is a very large number. If you're asking about how much money are we spending on cleaning the bench lands and that kind of thing.
Right.
For the city, it's well over $250,000. But the issue around spending money on the cleanup is really indicative of what these folks are saying, which is we're spending money failing, is what's happening in that. And it's a repetitious spending of money on a failing strategy in that regard. So what these folks and myself are talking about going forward are ideas about how you break that failure cycle, whether that's for the individual or frankly, whether it's for the government in terms of managing our budgets. It's how do you break that cycle? And I think you've heard some very good ideas about how to do that. I think the frustration on the part of the public is that always seems 2 or 3 arms lengths away. Where is something that's happening now that I can have trust and confidence? a lot of this conversation is from the point of view of the person experiencing the homeless life and all of the complexities that go with that. And I join all of this conversation. I don't have an issue with, but I think there's also another point of view here, which is how is the rest of the community experiencing that? How are they feeling about how their money is being spent and respent, and they think it's wasteful? So in the same way that I think that the folks here on this panel are saying it oftentimes takes multiple opportunities to reach out to somebody. It needs to be the right person at the right time, and that person needs to be ready for it. I think it was Larry Imwally from the city who told me one time, and it might have been you, Phil, who told me this, that oftentimes it takes 30 or 40 contacts with the same person before they're ready. Well, I understand that. That's cold comfort to the rest of the community who says, gee, why am I having to wait that period of time till that person is ready? And I think what you see happening politically at the state level is state legislators and the governor are saying the public's sort of running out of the compassion meter is dropping on this issue. There's I think growing feeling in the state when I talk to other folks in other communities, and I know it's certainly true in the city of Santa Cruz. I can't speak to the rest of the county, but in the city of Santa Cruz, sadly, the compassion meter on homelessness is dropping. And if all the good things that we want to do, whether it's law enforcement or the services side and so on, the public needs to support that. And we're in this very strange time where we're really clear on what and how to do this. We need the money to be able to do the things that are being talked about here. And the public is saying, well, I'll be damned if I'm gonna give you more money, because the last 2 times I gave you money and you said you were gonna get this thing solved, it got worse, not better. So I think that's, you just have to deal with it. It doesn't matter whether you like or don't like that. What matters is that it's a political reality right now. And so I think that if what we can do is each do what we do really well, county governments and the state government have a long track record of doing very, very good things across the board with people who are in various kinds of distress. And that's not just the folks who are experiencing homelessness. It's all the other folks in our communities and in our state who have enormous challenges in their life. State government's actually not half bad at designing systems that the counties can implement to help out on that. And so from my point of view about this, that if we want to see success in getting bond measures passed or getting legislation passed or getting a general obligation bond at the state level passed, which doesn't raise taxes because it has first claim on the general fund, then the public better be in a place where they believe that one more vote in favor of doing that kind of thing is going to produce results. So, I'm going to step into very dangerous territory right now.
We're really running out of time.
Yeah, well, I didn't have a lot of time. I'm gonna use mine.
You're also late.
So, that is absolutely fair. But I would say this. I'm gonna use the town clock as an example. Yeah, okay, that got real quiet now. Use the town clock as an example. So the town clock is there. The behavior is a good behavior. Feeding poor people who need help and don't have any other way really on a daily basis, speaking of routines, right? A routine for many people in the homeless space in the city of Santa Cruz is going to the town clock and getting fed. Now, that's good for them. I will tell you, every day when that happens, Sandy gets calls, I get calls, everybody gets calls about, well, what is that? What is going on? Why is that allowed to happen? And you go to the issue of behavior, not status. Behavior, not status. So the folks who provide that food in my estimation, I don't have an issue with Keith. I think Keith does a good job, but Keith refuses to play by the rules. He won't get a health permit, he won't get a use permit for the city park. Well, that's fine. Then we are all of a sudden confronted with the issue of whether we have one set of rules or two sets of rules. Do we have one set of laws for people who are housed and another set of laws for people who aren't housed? One set of laws for people who want to provide food by law and another one if they say no. That drives the electorates to distraction, And so it doesn't matter whether you agree with me or don't agree with me on it. The political reality is the public has to believe that what we're all talking about is helping people in need who in many cases are far beyond helping themselves in their life, maybe ever. But that if we're gonna do this and do it right, the public has to believe that they're going to see positive results in that, and that what they see as we can hear this argument here, discussion about, well, that used to be a felony and now it's a misdemeanor and so on and so on. The public is so friggin' indifferent to that. That means nothing to them. What it means is somebody came up with an excuse about why something can't get better from their perspective. And so I say that what we have to do here is all of the above is what has to happen in order for the public to regain some confidence that if they're being asked to raise their taxes or do something, that they're going to see an actual result.
Thank you. Sure. So we want to honor the audience's time, so they have time to ask questions. We also want to honor if the panel wants to leave with any final thoughts as well. I'll be honest, we're at 7:13 right now, so we
Supposed to be
failed,
out by
guys. We
7:30,
failed.
so, yeah.
Any final thoughts you want to share before we open it up to questions?
I can jump up on kind of this idea of what does a comprehensive solution look like, and Robert here is probably the one that can really speak to the numbers, but this is sort of a pop quiz on whether or not I'm reading his staff reports. But generally speaking, it would take about $70 million over the next 10 to 12 years of investment to create enough beds and enough shelter capacity to have a meaningful impact on this issue. Today we're getting about half of that, and it's from grants that we don't know whether or not they're going to be there next year. So that fundamentally is a big part of the problem, more money. But also, once we get that money, building the housing. And there's no better example of that than the Home Key project in SoCal, which I'm sure some of you heard about, where I faced fierce opposition from the neighborhood. We're trying to build 37 new units of housing for people who've experienced homelessness, veterans, families, and youth. And the problem is that we have such a violent reaction to what we've seen on the streets, and we're associating the disease with the cure. The cure is housing. We have to build more housing. And even in LA, they passed a $1.2 billion housing bond, but have only built 10% of that because neighborhood groups have resisted building it. So we need money, but we also need to say yes to building more housing.
Thank you so much. So how we're going to do this is we're going to do 2 audience questions, and I'm going to check if there's anyone on Zoom. Okay, so yes, my friend with the hat and the mask.
My name is Marina Archer, and actually Dr. Marina Archer, I came here to do a PhD in social science, social psychology, and I'm glad to meet all of you tonight. I think it's very important. And I would like to take all of you have said tonight and bring it down to a pragmatic example, to a story, because we talk in generalities and statistics. So I want to talk to you about my son. I have a son, his siblings grew up here and left. They made good lives elsewhere, but he was vulnerable and has psychological vulnerability, so he's been on disability for many years. SSI, SSDI. He lost the housing voucher because he couldn't find housing. And then after a series of crises, he ended up unhoused for 7 months and was living in his car. And this was just recently. And as he was living in his car, and I came to talk to Manu even to try to find a place where he could sleep. This guy was a top student in college, never got a parking ticket, never got a speeding ticket or anything. But in the 7th month in the car, as he was telling me how people would treat him, he never littered, never did anything. He deteriorated It deteriorated, and he told me in the last 2 months that he started drinking because he couldn't sleep. Try sleeping in a car for months. And then 2 months ago, he was arrested. He was taken to jail. I think he was overcharged. He couldn't even make a call, and I found out because the WhatsApp was not going through anymore. So, and in jail, first he was put in general violent population, where he got very traumatized. They didn't let him see his attorney. Somebody tried to crush his wrist. And they released him, and he went into a total mental breakdown, complete mental breakdown because of the trauma. He suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. So he's taken back to jail, put in mental health, and instead of being treated to telecare. And in jail, they put him in a room for 23 hours a day alone, where he develops psychic distress. And Wellcraft likes to use these methods: isolation, escalation, deprivation, domination, that are not used in any therapeutic settings in the US. So he decompensated terribly there, and I don't even want to tell you the condition he was in. And he was
Do you
finally,
have to get to the question?
yes, moved to telecare. And telecare was doing well. They moved him back to jail, where he is now, and decompensated again. I want to say this. I want to visit my son. It is part of his 14th Amendment, okay? He doesn't have a criminal history. He has never been convicted. He hasn't even had a preliminary hearing.
That's a timer.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
he's IST. Who can help me see him without having to get an attorney and paying $450 just to get him there? Because it is my right and it is his right. So
Fair
please,
courts.
if any of you can help me here in this, thank you.
Does someone want to respond to that?
I'll just see me after, I'll get you my card.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question that is specifically related to drug sales around our community. And I understand that criminalizing it just does not work. You know, I know the studies show it, and it hasn't worked in the past. And so we turn a blind eye. And my question though is it possible for us to like choose a very specific location, like a physical location, perhaps not in Santa Cruz City, but somewhere where we can turn the blind eye to drug sales and you know, drug purchases and all those things, but then not turn a blind eye in our parks and on our bike paths and in the public spaces that we've created to try and provide space for our families and children to be, which don't feel safe to me anymore. I mean, I had an experience, well, my family had an experience, my husband and my children were in San Lorenzo Park when there was a drug-related shooting, and
I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
I think we understand the question.
Yeah, okay, good.
So I would love to get an answer.
Yeah, is that
Could be quick.
possible? I mean, to just consolidate it somewhere so that.
Nick, you're excited about it. Stand up.
Yeah, I'll talk about that.
I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. So when we talk about the decriminalization of drugs, it was not the decriminalization of the sales of drugs. Let's be real, the drug dealers are predators. They're preying on the people with the disorder. They're preying on our kids. They're starting kids young. They create the problem that we run into. So we have not turned a blind eye to drug dealing. In fact, prior to my assignment, I ran our narcotics enforcement team, and that's all we did. Was the issue is it's a big issue. And so there are a lot, every time we took a drug dealer down, there was someone to replace them. But it's that constant battle, because I don't know if turning a blind eye to drug dealing, because that's opening up our kids to easier access because they know that law enforcement's not gonna be there. So I think that there still has to be that balance of aggressively prosecuting and going after the drug dealers. Especially now with fentanyl on the street, there are people overdosing left and right, and the dealers, that's what they're pushing out. Known or unknown to the buyer, they are pushing out fentanyl.
Okay, well, I guess then my question is, I mean, I'm like the squarest of the square people. How come I know exactly where to find all the drugs? Like, I tell you the bike paths, or I see multiple, you know, sellers selling. I see it in multiple parts, like in San Lorenzo, you got Mary Lagoon, Helltown, it's so prevalent that even I know where to get it.
I'll just say this one thing, and it's, there have been in the past past discussions around like safe injection sites, for example, similar to what they have in Vancouver. And anytime you mention that, people lose their minds. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's about, getting back to what Fred's saying. I mean, our job is to try to build a political will and have these conversations like we're having this evening to see, what would people want to tolerate? And I don't think that, well, I don't know. I mean, I think right now the sense in the community is that's not something that they would want. But it's a larger and broader discussion that needs to be had if this is something that people feel would help with the situation. So I'm not advocating one way or against, but I'm just saying that, that would be an option where people can get connected to services as well, but they could also get, drugs that are safe. They could be, have medical professionals there on board to make sure they're clean and that they're used properly. So it is an option, but I don't know if at this point in time we would be able to pull something like that off in this community.
Okay, about 12 hands went up, and I think we probably have time for 4. So I saw a hand in the purple shirt.
My name is Serge Cagno. I'm the co-chair of the county's mental health advisory board. And thank you, Justin. I'll try to talk louder. I'm not good at talking loud. The mental health advisory board wrote a letter to the board of supervisors. Some of you guys know what it's about. So my question, I really appreciated what a whole bunch of you guys had said. Danny talking about dignity and talking about finding a way to work through it and keep somebody in services. Bill, when you were talking about providing a service that actually works for people, that makes them come in, and the question about why people don't take services. So my question is, I saw an incident at the Veterans Memorial Building of a staff member who actually attacked a client for urinating behind a porta potty. My question to Robert, with respect to Justin and to Manu, what are you doing specifically to make the shelters safe and welcoming so people choose to take our shelters off?
There were specific names called out here.
I'll speak for that because I would say that is one isolated incident that has occurred recently. I'd say that over the course of the time that we've had our shelters open and that we've had when the Benjamins was run by the county, when we look at the Armory, when we look at the various shelters that we have up and running, we do have people who are treating people with kindness and care and having a welcoming and open environment. That incident occurred, and I got your letter, and we'll look into that incident. But I think that to characterize our homeless services as not being safe because of one incident is just unfair to us. And we put a lot of work into trying to make sure that our services are safe. And so we'll follow up on that single incident.
With respect, a lot of people are putting their heart into giving services, totally true, and I super believe that. What is the process that keeps people safe?
Okay, so the gentleman in the back has had your hand up the whole time.
Never went down.
No one back there.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to get through this without breaking it down. Mr. Contreras, your program you have up at Emmeline Street is great. I've worked with Jimmy Rodriguez, and he's been great. Chief Escalante, I had a business down at, by the Ross Camp for years, and your police department did everything they could to help alleviate issues I had along with Justin Cummings. The Sheriff's Department, you guys came by my house and saved my daughter from overdosing 3 weeks ago. But when you say you can't keep people in jail, jail used to be rehab. And all of us know, when we get arrested when we were younger, you'd keep us in jail for like 8 hours. Or you send us to jail and it'd be rehab. But Justin Cummings said fentanyl. The sheriff said fentanyl. Nobody else in this room said fentanyl. And it's ripping families apart. And why? Why? I could read every day on Facebook how many COVID cases were hospitalized, how many positive COVID cases there were, but it takes us a year to find out how many overdoses there were. Why the county doesn't tell us how many hospitalizations, how many ambulance visits, how many sheriff reports, how many police reports that are filled out for people overdosing on our streets is beyond me. And why the Health and Human Services Department isn't more on top of this and informing us, why I had to listen to a public service announcement on
KGO the other day that said, we don't wanna scare people, what we wanna do is just inform them. My son goes to SoCal High School, and if somebody overdoses in school, the school doesn't tell everybody, right? There's no fear driven in. My son learns about addiction at school, but they don't learn about the deaths and why the school and everybody isn't, and why every teacher isn't telling every kid not to take a Percocet, not to take an Adderall, not to take Oxycontin, not to take a Xanax, because they're all fake. And what Justin said is when they criminalized the opioid being distributed, everybody, the kids, my daughter graduated in 2019, they were all told it was coming from Mexican pharmacies. Like some of us maybe used to go down to Mexico and get Valium or something. So it was all.
I think we understand, and
I
I'm
don't
sorry.
think you understand
I'm
until
sure we
you go
don't
through what I
understand.
went through.
I'm sure we do not understand. I think we understand your perspective here, and I would love to hear from the panel. Does anyone have any response?
Sorry for getting
It wasn't
so
a really a question, but it was, there were a lot of issues brought up. Yeah, Danny, that would be great.
Man, I just thank you for your honesty and being able to share, you know, what's going on with Jimmy Rodriguez, that's another good example. Like most of my staff has got lived experience to be able to connect with patients, and that's a huge thing that I think the community has not talked about enough is fentanyl. So whenever I have got a chance, because I have my own story, I go into schools when I'm allowed to, and I'll go share my stories.
You should be allowed to all the time.
Yep, and we go tell them about fentanyl and overdose and Narcan. Like, we need to figure out a way to whatever collaboratives that we already have been talking about, instead of like people are like kind of holding back on this, we need to go let all our kids know about fentanyl. We need to let all our kids know about Narcan. We need to go in there and educate them. And we need to have some people with real life stories. I had in Salinas, a young man who was 16 years old, who we brought in there to share his story because he overdosed. The mother, Lisa, she's out of Gilroy. She comes with us sometimes when we go speak to share. Unfortunately, her son, 18 years old, took something that he thought was a Xanax, and he died. Right? I have a nephew who's been on the streets, who's overdosed over 9 times on fentanyl, and has mental health issues that sometimes it's a challenge to get him into care. But we need to educate. Really, the youth is a huge piece of that, and we really need to let everybody know about fentanyl and not be scared about it, not be scared about what people think, because it could be our kids' lives. There was I think it was a 12-year-old, somebody said over here, not too long ago, like that's serious, man. Like, we need to be able to get out there and tell people and educate people.
8 kids will split a Xanax bar, and 1 will die. 1 won't wake up in the morning.
Yep, it's not good.
I just want to say I'm so sorry about your experience, sir. I'm glad to hear your daughter at least is all right now. I'm gonna reach out to our health officer and make sure that these kinds of issues are better publicized and that all our kids, our entire community knows a running tally of where we're at with this.
I'll hit a couple really quick things in response. So harm reduction is something I really care about. And when I first got into office, we went and talked to the Syringe Services, SSP, Syringe Services Program. And they did say that they do have fentanyl test strips and Narcan that
You
people can
can't
use.
test the one you do. You can test around the outside of it.
It's called the chocolate chip effect. So you don't know where the fentanyl's at in the pill
Right.
because they're not real pharmaceuticals.
But the point I'm trying to get across is that, you know, for example, with Narcan, you can go and get Narcan for free from SSP, right? And I think that we should be having it more accessibly available. People should understand how to use it so that we can save lives as we try to address this issue. But then around the issue, around education, I went and met with some students at Aptos High the other week through connections with COPA. And I asked them, do you guys even have assemblies still? And they said no. So I think that this is an opportunity for us to really start having more assemblies where we're bringing kids together, we're having them talk to people with lived experiences and really trying to educate them on why they shouldn't be doing these things because of the risks that they run. So.
One last thing, if two people take something that has fentanyl in it, and they both have Narcan on them, and they both subside to it, nobody can administer Narcan to the other person.
So it is 7:30, you all promised to be here till 7:30, you met that.
We appreciate your cooperation, we
time.
appreciate you very much, and
Why
everyone
don't we
here.
extend for 15 minutes
Yeah,
with
So that's
permission?
everyone here is welcome to stay, the panelists, you're welcome to leave also. We so appreciate, this is time out of your life, this is not what you get paid for, and we really appreciate it. So if anyone wants to leave, that's totally reasonable, anyone here as well, but if, Lieutenant, could we use the room a little bit longer? I mean, I know we had a.
I'm here as long as you are, so
Okay,
yeah.
great. So if we could extend by 15 minutes. Which one? Danny's gonna start picking.
Right there.
Danny's picking.
Okay.
Right here.
Aurora? Oh,
Yes.
Aurora. Hi. So my name's Aurora. My mother is currently unhoused. She suffers from a mental health issue. I'm not gonna get into all the details. She's been in and out. We all know what happens. But my one thing I really want to point attention to, and I think actually Phil might have left, but the situation of someone having the decency to be able to live in their private life alone in a little teeny shelter is the best option that there is. Okay, my mother's 70 years old. She's never lived with anyone in her whole life besides her 2 children. And then we're going and asking them to go take shelter with another human being that they don't know, and to sleep, do the most private thing in our lives, sleep with them, okay? They're not gonna do it. They're gonna stay on the street. They're gonna do anything possible to never have to do that, okay? So my question is, why can't we try out a pilot program? I understand all the county and their protected grounds and all of this kind of thing, but why can't we try out a pilot program of these little housing dwelling units? And maybe even, I mean, I'll be out there on a Saturday helping build one. Like, why can't we have community support, like Habitat for Humanity or all of our community people go in and build these tiny little shelters that someone could be safe in? So that's my question, is who can help get that going? Thank you.
Lisa?
I mean, all I can say is it's all about the money, right? So the location, finding a place costs money. Having the pallet shelters or tiny cabins costs money. And you can't just set it up and walk away. You have to set it up and you have to have services and you need an operator. It's easy to think that you can do this and people will be fine on their own. And it's not safe, because it needs to be a secure location. So for a number of reasons, unfortunately, I share that vision. I think that's a fantastic idea. Our 1220 is just like that, only it's tents. Love to see, we've been talking about swapping them out, putting the shelters up. But it's not free, and resources are limited. And if we, I know Rob and I have this conversation all the time, if we had more money to do this and the locations, we both believe, I think, that that's a great option. How do we get there?
Well, I'll jump in on that. That's exactly the idea of doing a 2-part bond measure where you've got the brick and mortar side, call it the 2x4 and whatever side of it, but what you're talking about is exactly what you do when you put a, pardon me?
Well, it's years down the line though, they're talking now.
We understand. If you want to finish your thought.
That's okay. We're good. We're good.
Anything else?
I wanna say one thing, and this is gonna be totally off topic, but I feel like it's on topic. So we just had a massive flood in Pownell. All those people, some of their houses have been condemned. I got family and friends that live there, and they're not getting a lot of attention right now. They're already, I don't know, I think the shelter things have been closed, and some of them, where are they supposed to go? Those are all people that are gonna be homeless, a lot of them, right? Some are going back to their homes, and they're staying in their homes. They got mud everywhere. I don't know if anybody's been through it. I drive through there every day back home. Like, that's a whole nother community that's gonna probably be over here too, in Santa Cruz County. Just walk across the bridge, and if they can stay there and fix some of the things, that's a whole lot of more stuff, right? And there's a lot of more equity and racial stuff there too, right? Because it's like everything gets broken on the poor side of town. So that's a whole nother piece, and I know I'm throwing a monkey wrench out here, but like this is our whole community, whether that's Monterey County or not, it's like, we need to help out our folks. And somehow, I don't know how that looks like, or Santa Cruz can do something or not. Maybe they need to extend the border, I don't know, there's probably a lot of stuff, Santa Cruz go all the way to Prunedale, I don't know. But they're closer to Watsonville. Most of those people get services on this side of the bridge anyways.
Okay, we have a question here. Sure.
Thanks, Marvin. Thank you so much, everyone. Try to be pretty succinct. I have a couple points that I wanna make and a couple questions. There's a point I wanna make and questions I have about policing, concerns about downtown, and a point I wanna make about the conversation that we're having and something that I'm hearing that I think is not serving the conversation. So, I'm from Santa Cruz, I grew up here, my parents settled here in 1975. I think I'm a product of Santa Cruz schools, like a lot of us. I know there are a number of us in this room who are raising kids here. A lot of what we've heard people talking about tonight are a lot of the logistics and the practical aspects of trying to manage this problem of homelessness in this community. We're certainly in the city of Santa Cruz hearing a lot of compassion and sympathy for people who are unhoused. We know this is a complicated problem and it's statewide. So I grew up here, Harbor High School, with several of us I know in this room, little time at Cabrillo, and then was off to New York and LA for 30 years. I moved back here a little over a year ago because our sons were 12, and when I was 12, this was a great place to be. I would go downtown to the cafes, do my homework, and there's a tremendous amount of culture here that propelled me to a lot of great things in my life. So a few of us were downtown a couple weeks ago when the kids performed.
That's our driver, so you have to get to your question.
Kids performed at the basketball game, the Warriors game. I'm not usually on the mall on a Saturday night at 9:30 p.m. So I was down there with several of our 13-year-olds. And it's very hard to avoid inhaling pot when you're down there. It's interesting to be in a situation when you're with young kids. I was surprised to see not only a tremendous amount of drug use on the mall, but people just flat out sitting down on the mall, big clusters of homeless people passing bongs around, using heroin. You see people with needles in their arms. I was downtown yesterday just to try to pass out some flyers for this event, and it was as bad as I have ever seen it. I saw many junkies passed out cold on the mall with needles, with drug paraphernalia. It feels like, and I know that this is complicated, I know that you can't just lock everybody up, but I'm surprised that I'm seeing so much drug use in public, and that I'm not seeing police. I sometimes work in the library, so at the Capitol Library, it's a great system. There are homeless people in the library, but in the library there are rules, and the librarians are enforcing them. And if a homeless person in the library is speaking loudly, the librarian will ask them to follow the rules that everybody else in the library is following. I don't understand why we're letting people conduct themselves in this way. And I understand that maybe it's not.
Come on, yeah. Exactly, come on, lady.
Isn't there somebody that
We know
say
this,
just
they
go
know
too
this.
We
long?
have to.
But this is not something they don't know.
I'm sorry, this is a quiet environment. Chief, you have, if I can have a response.
Well, I apologize for that experience, and there are a lot of challenges, and we've talked about them. A lot of those instances, I don't know if people have called us to report it. A lot of those instances will result in citations, and we would leave them there. The jail doesn't take them. The jail's not the answer either. It's a real challenging situation with the substance abuse issues. I will say that the Santa Cruz Police Department is at 68% staffing. So we don't have the focus of certain areas that I wish we had to address the proactive drug dealing or the situations you're talking about. So I don't have the answer right now. I apologize for your experience. I think that we do work hard. We do make a lot of arrests and address a lot of situations, but it is sort of a cyclical, in, check out sort of thing until there's wraparound services for those folks.
So, anybody else want to touch on that? So this.
I just want to say, that with the chief's experience having, you know, what, a 32% vacancy on the police force, we see it also in the sheriff's office. We have a whole correctional unit down at Roundtree that we can't open up because we don't have enough correctional officers. So the housing problem, not only is it a problem because we can't house people who are dealing with these issues, we can't house our own staff.
Hi there, my name is Erica. I'm actually new to the Santa Cruz area. I've been here since December, getting involved with other organizations because I'm big on homelessness and different things of that nature. I have about 20 questions, so I'm gonna be a lot. I'm just kidding. We're asking me student government, so I actually have a suggestion. What I've learned in college and doing different organizations is we can't accomplish everything in one night. So my question to them, and just everyone in the room, how would it be to actually have these more continual meetings? Because it's just so much. And then not only that, I'm a firm believer. It's, I tend to doodle sometimes, like what I'm a visionary at the same time. So you got the government, you have all these different organizations and representatives in this room. If we could branch out, meaning have committees, like, okay, if someone's dealing with housing, okay, instead of 2 people, now we have 4, and just do it that way. And then when we have these meetings, it's more of, okay, what was your findings, or, okay, fill us in. So that's just what, you know, my suggestions.
Yeah, I think we understand, and I'd love to know if anyone on the panel has thoughts or ideas. I mean, we're just 2 citizens. We live and work here, and we have families here, and we've had pretty bad experiences, and we got together and cornered Mayor Keeley, and then it spread to this. So it's, we can't do it. I don't think there's a position for us.
This is day 1. You're doing
But
great.
this is day 1, and I think this can work. And your time's up. So are there any thoughts about this? And again, I respect your time. I'm really sorry to be
Please
late.
don't feel guilty to leave.
Yeah, you're welcome
We're not
to leave,
handcuffed.
but if you have something, I would love to know, Dr. Radler.
Well, yeah, I appreciate everybody's comments about the things that they're witnessing and the challenges that loved ones that people have in their family, or people you see on the streets who are engaging in behavior that's disturbing and struggling with addiction. I come from a medical and a public health background, so I have a particular way of thinking about this issue, and I think the comment, for me, people struggling with health conditions, I think of it from a public health lens. And I appreciate the idea of the whole community needs to mobilize to figure out how do we support the change in the collective behavior. So I think of the public commons that I hear a lot of people talking about, people using in public, struggling with addiction. The librarian is a great example for me. The librarian would come up to someone and have a conversation. How many of us in the room are able to go and have hey, could you not do that here? So how do we build up that capacity collectively to have conversations with people and create a sense of what's appropriate in the public commons? Law enforcement can't do it alone. We all need to be working to create a culture of encouraging people to get in, to support and care. And each one of us can contribute to that. So whether it's committees or thinking about what I can do tonight that's going to be a little different from what I did the next day to make a difference in this issue. I think if we're all leaning in, we're going to make some progress.
Thank you.
Yep. Real quick, I'll just say that, so I was on the city's public safety committee for about, I think 2, maybe 3 years. And oftentimes there's maybe 1 or 2 people who ever show up to those meetings. So we do have committees and commissions that exist in local government. You are more than happy to reach out to us and ask us to put something on the agenda. More than happy to come and comment during public comment, but we have these committees and we have these meetings and nobody shows up. And so I just encourage you all to go on the city website, go on the county's website, find the commissions that align with your values on these topics, and start showing up to meetings.
That's great.
And some of these boards too aren't just government officials, they're community members. So if you're interested in being on one, reach out to your local officials, because you can serve on these committees that actually inform your local government.
Thank you. And we do have a lot of you signed up, a lot of you probably haven't, but safetyinSantaCruz.com, again, it was started by 2 people with like $12. We have a little website. It was a sign up just for this event. But we do have a list of emails now. If you haven't signed up, please feel free to register there. And we can try to distribute some of that. Hey, guess what? There's a committee for public safety, and you guys can join. So we'll work with this panel hopefully, and we'll try to come up with some of those options for involvement. And again, I don't think it can be us hosting these all the time or doing this, but I really appreciate the Sheriff's Department for letting us be here. Appreciate all of you for being here, all of you for showing up. We can maybe take one more question, but we've gone way over, and there's 5 of you.
I just have 4, it'll take 3 minutes, okay?
No.
Jeffrey Arles.
Jeffrey.
My wife and I are here. We have lived experience in this town. It was very tragic. I want to bring attention to everybody on this board. I want to thank you so much for the work you're doing. We're moving forward step by step. I'm going to give you each a copy of the roadmap to the ideal crisis system. The first step we need to take is to get a vision, okay? It sounds like, oh, soft talk, but I'm talking, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to be in the same place we are today, okay? We need a vision, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. What do we want? I hear people, we want something, right? Okay, so that's the first step. I'll give you a copy of this. The second part is we use the term stigma. Stigma is words. What is happening is discrimination.
Oh God, can I ask a real question?
We have to grasp that. I do it, we do it, okay? Please start using discrimination. If we have 2,000 people that are homeless and 500 beds, there's some discrimination there. It's not a fault. I'm not trying to blame anybody. We hear about the financing, all of those things. The continuum of care. We need the continuum of care. I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Thank you all. I'll give you a copy of the roadmap. I'm on the Mental Health Advisory Board. You can contact me anytime you want to. We can address and solve these problems and make life better for everyone here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Yeah, this is a really quick question. Can we just get rid of the illegal camping in Warren Lake? Just, that's my whole question. Everything that's been said today has been
Concise, cool.
all carrot and no stick, 100%. So it's not legal to camp on the beaches. I've written to you. I've filled out the sheriff's app multiple times, as have my neighbors that live in the Point. And people have been camping there for 6 months doing drugs, and nothing has been done. And I know you see it when you drive on East Cliff every single day, and it's just, you guys are getting an F rating. Nothing's been done.
I'm sorry, so this is the first I have heard directly about this particular problem. I knew there was some camping around the Corcoran era and
Yeah, Corcoran as well. I live right there.
I wasn't aware that it was ongoing.
I don't know how you cannot be aware of that. It's as plain as day that they're out there all day doing drugs. It's a family beach. It's being bogarted by people
We'll
that
get out
are.
there and look at it.
Yeah,
Take my card, hit me.
Awesome, cool.
That's it.
First of all, I think everybody in I think I speak for everybody in Santa Cruz, that we're not anti-homeless. We're anti-behaviors associated with the homeless. And having said that, and the library analogy, where do we take those folks that, homeless or not, that are doing lawless behavior, antisocial behavior? And then I heard someone say, oh, we don't have room in the jails. Well, Blaine Street shut down because there's no staffing. That's kind of a poor excuse. Roundtree is wide open. I look at the sheriff, and by the way, somebody's asking about where the statistics about overdoses. They're actually on the sheriff's webpage. You got to dig down, and they have a monthly report, everything, deaths and so forth. It's actually quite interesting. But you see, the utilization of the jails, and there's room there. Why are we spinning folks in the Roundtree and some of these other places?
That's the question?
As I said, the cost of living is so high here that it's extremely difficult to recruit everyone. Lifeguards, correctional officers, police officers. You want to help solve the problem, approve new housing in your neighborhood.
That was gonna be my question. It's quick. Is there anything else that we can do as citizens, people that work here and live here and everything, to help all of this? Like, what's the best avenue we can use? Do we write to you guys?
And
What do
you're
we do?
beautiful, thank you. Yeah, what can we do?
What can we do? Well, I'll get out there and shovel some mud, of course, but, and I spoke with you, and I'm emailing you. Will that help?
Any ideas, please?
I think that when it comes to like citing new locations applications for whether it's affordable housing or it's, you know, it's permanent supportive housing, or if it's a, you know, a pallet shelter camp or what have you, like mobilizing people to support it. Because we always get people who oppose. And so then it's like, okay, well, we can't put this here. And then we have people who are putting up flyers saying, do you want, you know, this, whether it's Ross Camp or the Benchlands, do you want this in your neighborhood, call your, you know. So we always get pushback. And that's what we need, is we need people to be more accepting and allow us to put more services throughout the entire county so we have places for people to go. I think the other thing too is if you have a rental, you know, like consider accepting someone who's Section 8. Because there's people who are on like a 10-year Section 8 wait list, and then they get a voucher and then they can't find a place to live. So it's like we have all these services, we have opportunities and options, but we get so much pushback all the time that makes it difficult. And I'd say the last thing too is that there's a state law that says that property owners can't discriminate against Section 8 voucher holders, but we know that there's no mechanism to enforce that. So we have all this market rate housing that's going in, that someone with the Section 8 voucher could actually go and get a unit in there, but we know that they don't want a Section 8 person, they're gonna want somebody who has, you know, more money. And so that's an issue, that's a struggle for us too, is how can we make that work?
Yeah, Jessica was one of the beginning of this group, so Jessica, I already.
Born and raised here. I've been an addict, I've been homeless, I now own multiple properties. Thank you everybody for joining. You probably remember me from last time, but I just wanna say, since we're not asking questions anymore, it is not a housing problem. This is a Santa Cruz enabling problem. I mean, how many syringes did we find doing beach cleanups? This is a problem that needs, we need to stop focusing on this as just a housing problem. This is an enabling, and he talked about how many people don't accept help because it's easy to live on the streets here. Just saying.
I understand that point of a slightly different perspective, but first I just want to thank all of you for inspiring conversation. I mean, it's a really, really complex problem, and I feel great hearing all of the thoughtful work that's happening, because it really is happening. But what I was hoping this meeting would have more of, and what I think we need to talk more of, maybe in the next one or at another, is about how do we, you know, long-term and short-term, all that's long-term. Short-term, how do we secure the community so that the town is safe? Because the town doesn't feel safe. None of the public spaces feel safe. And the statistics bear that out, that they are not safe. We are in the top 3% most dangerous cities in America. I mean, the overwhelming feeling in most of the public spaces is that the community has ceded them to drug use and mental health crisis. And that's terrible, because the community, we should be able to do both. There's nothing anybody said here that I have a problem with. I think we should be moving on all of those fronts. There's no question that's the long-term fix. But we also need to secure the community for the other 230,000 people who need to use those public spaces. Anyway, if it's a question, the question is, what are we doing to secure the city?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone want to touch that one?
I know you're all tired, but maybe you can. Someone's thinking. I see Robert thinking.
Well, yeah, I think I want to acknowledge that it's important to separate out public space and public safety from housing and homelessness, and be clear about why we're gathered and what we're trying to talk about and what we're trying to address. So I appreciate you bringing up that focused area specifically. And I think having worked in multiple communities, I've heard this idea of enabling people in multiple communities. And I think for me, it's more about how do we really deeply engage in the issue so we can get to a place where people feel safe and secure walking in public parks. And this is true for housed and unhoused people. There are many people who are unhoused who don't feel safe every night with their situation. And I think they get lost in the conversation. I appreciate folks who've talked about their personal experiences being unhoused. So how do we engage in a collaborative conversation with folks who have experience or are currently unhoused, with people who are housed, and come up with some common solutions so that the public commons feel like a more safe public commons? And I think it's a follow-up conversation that I hear you asking for.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, my. Hi, I'm Dawn.
Hi, Dawn.
I'm with Food Not Box.
Great.
And,
Thank you.
I have seen through the last 3 years, a lot of things have changed, and I feel safe, actually, walking through town. One reason is I know a lot of the people, and, you know, with operating down at Santa Cruz Town Clock, we've gotten 2 24-year-olds jobs from people doing community service hours at our food line. And, you know, we were able to sign off the sheet because there are people that are authorized through the criminal department. But my question, we were able to get 2 24-year-olds a job. And they also, through that job, they got a house. So, you know, yes, there's a lot of people lying around there, but we don't tolerate people drinking or smoking. If they do, we ask them to leave. So, you know, during the 3 hours that we were there, we supplied clothes and you were there a lot of times helping. And so I really liked helping with Food Not Bombs. I've been with it for 7 years. But I just want to know, the city said they were going to start feeding the people, and that I heard that like a year ago. We put in over 1,000 days of feeding the people down there. And we wanted to know when that was gonna start, because St. Francis is not serving, they're giving them a bagged lunch, a cold sandwich or cold pizza. So we just were wondering when the city was gonna start feeding them a hot lunch,
Okay,
is my
question. Question posed. Anyone wanna? Sorry?
Well, sure, I think so. That is the handoff that has to happen correctly, and I completely agree with you, that it can't be substituting hot meals with a sandwich and a bag of chips, and God bless you and hope you do well. That is not the plan. The plan is an actual, essentially replicating what you folks do, which I think what you do feeding poor people is a great thing. My issue isn't with that.
Yeah, it's not just unhoused either.
But that's, say it again?
It wasn't just unhoused people, it was people in low income.
That's why you said poor people.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't say unhoused. Yeah,
Yeah.
anybody who showed up.
Exactly.
Which I really like that part. That's the same thing St. Francis does. They're now getting into the place where very, very soon now, it's going to be replicating the hot meal issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not supposed to be until May, so now for a whole month, you have a community of people that are laying around the mall. You know, people are asking, you know, what are we doing about the crime? But when you send 200 people out in Santa Cruz without a place to go and visit, because they, you know, to me they were my family. You know, the people that came, we gave hugs. We you know, they felt like family.
Yeah. I think we have to move on
You know,
to another question.
But that was just then. We were shut down really quick, and I wish we would have just kind of like moved us. We were tired. He's tired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That was
You know,
good.
just that's all I wanted
Okay,
to say.
no, both of you have already spoken. Is there anyone else?
I saw you had your hand up earlier.
Oh, right here.
Gentleman in the blue hat. Did you still want to ask a question?
I'd like to quote a campaign slogan that I heard for city council. And it was something to the effect of, I don't wanna hear any more about needles on the street until we start talking about needles in the bedrooms and the living rooms of the house people of this city. The amount of drug use that's going on the streets mirrors what's going on in the bedrooms and in the bathrooms of people who pay mortgages. Drug abuse is not just for the people on the streets. And I'd also like to quote a footnote out of Martin D. Boise, which is the ruling that says that you cannot hassle somebody about sleeping outside unless you have a place for them to sleep. And in a footnote, Justice Blackmun was quoted from a earlier decision where he said, if you are homeless and live on the street and you drink on the street, you are drinking in your home, and that is not illegal.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anyone on the panel have anything to respond?
I'll just say, I think it's something that Robert touched on, you know, when there's not enough private space, when there's not enough houses, for people to manage their stuff in their homes in private, then they have to manage it in public. So I do think it does come back to being a housing problem.
I'm sorry, I
Thank
really
you,
don't
guys.
think we have time for.
Thank you, everyone.